Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Courage in You podcast, where we talk about real and raw conversations about mental health. So this is a continuation of the series that I am doing with my sorority, which is Alpha Kappa Omicron. And I have two special guests for us, which is two of my sisters, Camille and Carla. So I want to introduce both of them. So first, Camille, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, of course. Well, what's good, beautiful people? My name is Camille Kinga. My pronouns are she, her, hers. At the age of 12, and I've come to realize that it's a continuous journey that's always going to be a part of me. My goal and my purpose that I've kind of found through all this is just to help people with their healing journey. So really grateful to be here with my sisters, to have this platform to talk about something that's really close to my heart.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. And next, Carla, please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me. Like she said, my name's Carla. I'm 25. Yeah, 25. And my career actually doesn't revolve around like mental health or psychology. I'm actually like, super into like politics and like law and things like that. But the connection that I have to this issue is that it's impacted my family repeatedly since I was a kid. And me being the like kind of the decision maker of my family. Both my parents are immigrants and I'm the oldest of three sisters. So I feel like it's fallen a lot on my shoulders, a responsibility to keep myself educated and to keep my family members safe and to keep myself advocating for the things that I know that we need to talk about more. And so that's why I'm constantly engaging in things like our philanthropy and things like this podcast, because I firmly believe in this cause.
Thank you so much for being here. And I really, really appreciate for both of you being here. So I'm going to talk about the topic of the day, which is suicide prevention and self-harm prevention and awareness. So I'm going to introduce my sister, Michelle, to talk more about the philanthropy.
Hello, I'm Michelle, and I'm the service chairperson for this year for AKO. So suicide awareness and self-harm prevention is part of AKO's philanthropy. Our goal of this philanthropy is to spread awareness about suicide within our community and give space for those to share their stories, as well as remind them to continue to keep going. Every year, our sorority hosts an event called And So I Live, which gives our community a space to share their reasons for why they continue to live, and we create a visual displaying everyone's responses. And it's a way to show anyone struggling with their mental health to see how much there is to live for. And we also provide information and facts surrounding suicide. And then along with that, our sorority supports the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, where we host fundraisers to collect donations, as well as attend their Out of the Darkness Walk event. And now Carla, who created this philanthropy, will explain more about the history and more information about each.
So for the event that we started putting on annually, it's called And So I Lived. And I started, I believe, in 2016. And I was looking for something that I could do, that I could put on surrounding this issue. And I discovered the To Write Love on Her Arms Foundation. And I read a little bit about their story. And there was one particular story that really stuck out to me, about a woman who was like carving things into her arms, but she was carving words of like self-hatred and like just like insults, like derogatory terms, like negative things about yourself. And that's why that foundation is called the To Write Love on Her Arms Foundation, because what they aspire to do is inspire people to perceive themselves in a loving way and to do things with love and to do things with positivity instead of being so like hard and like derogatory on ourselves. And so I was super moved by that and I wanted to do something similar. At the time, one of my younger siblings was struggling a lot with anxiety, depression, self-harm, self-mutilation, things like that. And I genuinely just didn't know what to do about it. Like I wanted to guide her, I wanted to help her, and I wanted to be there for her, but I really didn't know how. And it was such a taboo topic in my household. My parents didn't really talk about it. None of my like aunts or uncles, they just kind of tried to brush it under the rug. And I could see how it impacted her. I could see how it was like steering her in the wrong direction. And I was like terrified of losing her. And so I said a lot of things that, looking back on it, I had the really, really good intentions, but I probably shouldn't have said them. And same for my actions. And the reason why I hold this event is to help out other people who might be facing a similar situation, whether they be in my shoes and they don't know what to do and how to help others. They can come, they can get resources, they can get educated, they can see how they can help their loved one. And if it's somebody who's in my sister's shoes, then I hope that they can look at all of these reasons that other people chose to continue living, and they identify themselves with that struggle and they feel less alone. So it's kind of my holistic approach to shining light on this issue, no matter how it impacts you personally. And it's a really good way for me to honor my sister. It's just something good that I think came out of like all that struggle, like even though it was hard at the time, like because of what happened and because we got through it, every year for a week, other people get to experience this.
Thank you so much for explaining. I think it's really beautiful that you created this philanthropy, created this event, because it's basically learning from other people. You know, I always talk about how it's really important to share your story, because you never know how much you can inspire other people. So thank you so much for explaining it. And so we're going to start talking about the topic is, why is suicide awareness important, and what is it? So suicide awareness is important because we, like Carla said, is that suicide is kind of like a taboo, especially for a lot of cultures. And a lot of people like are afraid to talk about it, or they have this misconception of it. And like the prevalence of suicide is like increasingly high, like it's increasing through generations. And it like really makes me sad to know that there's so many people who commit suicide, and there's so many things that we could do, but it's hard to, because we have this whole stigma. And to realize that like suicide awareness isn't basically ending suicide, but it is bringing to attention. It's giving a platform for people to educate themselves about how to prevent suicide, how to help people with suicide, how to give people the opportunity to share their stories, to inspire to other people, and to help people explain their pain in any way they can. So I'm gonna ask you two, why do you think suicide awareness is important?
All right. So why I think suicide awareness is important, it's because suicide awareness is critical intervention into a typically silent fight, right? Suicide ideation and depression and feelings of self-harm are typically come into fruition because individuals feel so stuck, alone, isolated, and misunderstood in their feelings, right? So suicide awareness and self-harm prevention is a way to bring more opinions and perspectives and insights to light that will typically get erased or forgotten.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. How about you, Carla?
For me, I think that events like this and suicide awareness and self-harm prevention is important because I think that there's a common misconception that mental health struggles and mental illness in general is like this dark, like sad, like soft, melancholic, like kind of thing. And they associate only certain characteristics with being a mental health struggle. And so a lot of times what ends up happening is that somebody is experiencing a mental health crisis, or somebody is having a lot of really confusing emotions that they don't really know how to process, and they're aware that they're not reacting in an appropriate way, but they just don't know what to call it. And things like that, like genuinely not knowing what it is, can drive people like to such disparity. And then you're in a situation where you just feel so desperate and lost and hopeless. And so I think that these informationals are really, really good to have, because they shine light on not just the type of mental health issues that are common and more understood, but also others that may not come around as often, that may not be as understood, they may not be talked about as much, because it validates them. It lets them feel like, or it is my hope that it makes them feel like their struggles are valid too, that this is that, and that just because they're not the dictionary definition of a mental illness doesn't mean that that's not what it is.
Yeah. And it's true that like no matter if someone has a diagnosis of a mental illness or someone who's just simply struggling or someone who's like grieving, anybody can think about suicide. And it's really important to remember that it's more common than we think it is. And it's really important to like see that I must be aware of it and what can I do for it. Because suicide awareness kind of helps people feel less alone. Just like Camille said, that this is a way to help people. And it's not ending suicide, but it's giving attention to it. And it's a kind of stopping the stigma around suicide. And it's kind of stopping the stigma of like, we actually should talk about it. It's actually not a taboo. It's actually something that we should normally talk about because we lose so many people every day, and it leaves families think about like what could I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What can happen? Because there's a lot of people who lose their loved ones to suicide and they don't even know. So next, we're going to talk about why do people contemplate suicide, or why do they self-harm? And I know this question is a really, really hard topic to talk about. And a lot of people don't want to talk about it because people look at suicide awareness and think of the basics of it. But a part of suicide awareness is to learn about the deep and depth things of it and to understand why do people think about it, or why do people self-harm? Because we have this huge misconception that people who commit suicide are weak or they're selfish or it's a selfish deed. And it's not that at all. Like the biggest reason why people who don't share that they're suicidal is because of this huge misconception that, oh, if I admit that I'm suicidal, people are going to think I'm weak. But we must change this misconception and say that if you like, there's power in sharing your story. There's power in asking for help, and there's power to reaching out to people. So I want to ask you two, why do you think people self-harm and contemplate suicide?
For me, I think that the reason why people ponder it, or the reason why people engage in self-harmful activities, and I also want to be mindful that self-harm is not always like, like cutting yourself. Like it doesn't have to be that. Self-harm is like letting your spaces get ridiculously like unlivable, like the conditions, like letting it get super messy. You stop brushing your teeth, you stop brushing your hair, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not feeding your body good things, like you're engaging in self-destructive behavior. And when people do those things, I genuinely think that it's because they are having difficulty processing something, whether it be an emotion, whether it be an unresolved childhood trauma, whether it be stress that they happen to be undergoing at the time. They are not processing it, and it's impacting how much they just genuinely care about themselves, how much they genuinely care about keeping up with the things that are good for them. And it's that self-destructive behavior that I think a lot of the times when we do it, we don't even realize that this is what it is. Because like I said earlier, when you think self-harm, when you think self-destruction, like a lot of people's minds directly, like automatically deviate to self-mutilation. And that's not always the case.
Thank you. And yeah, I love that. Is that, yeah, we kind of have this perception of self-harm is only cutting yourself. But it's much more than that. We must like educate ourselves that what self-harm could actually be in different circumstances. How about you, Maria?
So first, I definitely want to name that everyone will have a different reason for why they contemplate suicide or why they engage in self-harm activities, and that the overgeneralization of being in that mindset is only going to be harmful to people struggling. Like we need to be open and understanding to everyone's story, because everyone's story is unique. In terms of why my personal understanding of why people contemplate suicide is because of the lack of genuine care and understanding from the world around them, as well as the inability to kind of understand and navigate your emotions in a healthy way. And the reason why it kind of gets to that point, right, is because it's a layered type of thinking. Like, negative self-talk can trickle into so many things if you're not in the space to personally push back. So connecting that into what you said earlier on how there's a stigma that's a very selfish act to engage in suicide ideation or to attempt suicide, it ties into that individuals really think that if you are hurting, if you are in immense pain, if you are in a place where you can't uplift, you can't find your own joy or just get through these issues, then that's on you. That has nothing to do with the circumstances that put you there. That has nothing to do with the harmful actions of others. That has nothing to do with your state of mind. Get over it. You have to pick yourself back up. And it's narratives like that it doesn't help individuals to hear those type of things. It only affirms their perspective of life right now, that see, people don't understand me. See, people aren't here for me. And again, I'm not putting the responsibility onto others, but I am saying that when we talk about why people may think of suicide or may think of self-harm, we really have to understand the contexts that put them there.
Yeah. And that's really, really important. I'm glad that you talked about it, is because, you know, some people think it's like, oh, it's because they're sad about this. Oh, because this happened. Oh, because they're not generally happy with themselves. No, it's like people kind of think about suicide and they don't even want to ask why. And sometimes asking why is really important for them. Sometimes you asking them why they think like this can help them, because they have the opportunity to explain themselves. They have the opportunity to help someone understand them. And for you, and if anyone here in the audience is like thinking about like what to do for a loved one or friend, it's, if you just ask, it could help a lot. You know, it gives them the opportunity, and like it makes them feel like someone cares and someone is willing to understand me and someone's willing to be educated. And that is something that, oh, maybe I could still live because at least one person cares, at least one person asks. And I also do want to put to light is that some people who have suicide ideations, and actually most people don't choose to be, you know, we always talk about depression, but let's talk about people who have diagnoses such as schizophrenia, bipolar, more in depression, that sometimes you can't control these voices. And sometimes some people's voices tell them to commit suicide, even if they don't want to. And it's a very complicated and thing to understand. But as long as you educate yourself, and as long as you ask them, maybe they'll tell you. And if you know anyone who does have this diagnosis and is contemplating suicide, you should still ask them and see if they can get help. So just like you both said, that suicide is different for everybody. So don't think one perception of why someone's going to self-harm or someone commit suicide, because you never really, really know what is going on in their head, what is going on with their life, what is the backstory of what's happening right now, what are they doing for themselves? Because most people who contemplate suicide or self-harm, they spent months or even years fighting themselves, fighting their demons for it. So if you know someone who is going through that, try to make sure to ask them, to educate yourself, to understand. And that's a really, really big part of suicide awareness, is that it's it is a lot to think about, but when you really care for someone, just asking and understanding is really, really a simple thing.
Mm-hmm. And recognizing that if someone close to you is brave enough to share a reason for why they're contemplating suicide, why they feel the need to self-harm, more likely than not, even though they're sharing that one reason, they have so many other reasons. And so just to be open to that and don't allow just that single moment of bravery to give you a sense of, oh, I fully understand your struggle, because that's really not the case.
Yeah. And to realize that if someone like even tells you one reason, that's something really strong of them. And to recognize, oh, thank you for sharing that for me. Let me be here. Let me help you the way, like, how do you want me to help you? You know, like ask them how do they want to help you, or even if they say, oh, I don't know how you can help me, something like you being there could help them. You asking just one, how are you doing? Okay, just spending a day with them, just sitting with them in silence can help. So thank you for that. Was amazing.
Or can I share more about self-harm?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for sure. So Carla named it beautifully, right? That self-harm means more than what people really jump towards. And it's really, and right, like self-harm is directly to cutting. And I think that's really important to name. And at the same time, I think it's also important to destigmatize those who think self-mutilation like is the way to go, right? And to really understand why people may choose that sort of harm. I think mental health is a very layered experience that people tend to oversimplify. And for me, when I'm personally in a very, very low point and a dark place, it's almost a physiological feeling. Not like I'm not only thinking these thoughts and fighting with myself, but I'm also, my body feels heavy. The worst part is when my body feels numb, right? And that's where the idea, for me personally, because I don't want to speak on anyone's, that is where the idea of self-harm or self-mutilation came to be. Was at that point, I was fearing that I couldn't feel anything because I felt so much pain, I felt so much hurt. And so for me, making that choice was my way of not necessarily contemplating my life, but attempting to remind myself, like, to get me out of shock that I can feel something. And I understand that is a very, I want to say, like, misdirection of my thoughts and actions, right? And at the time, that was really the only thing that brought me peace, that allowed me to breathe again, that allowed me to come back into my body. And I really want to name that if you are contemplating self-mutilation, or if you have been battling those thoughts for years in and out, you are so strong and you are so brave. And you can continue to learn on how to not directly engage in your own harm. Like, you've experienced enough harm from the world. You should not take that on for yourself. You shouldn't have to. There are other ways to relieve your body of all of that pain and all of that sorrow.
Thank you so much for showing like vulnerability. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I think that's really beautiful to like hear a perspective of someone like you, to see if anyone in the audience can understand or can't like felt exactly what you're talking about. So thank you. Okay, and so now we're gonna talk about, so what are some behaviors and warnings you should look for someone who is thinking about suicide or self-harm. So for me, I would say some warning signs to look out for is like cries for help. And like I talked about in the other podcast, other episode, is cries for help isn't only someone who's crying in front of you. Sometimes someone just reaches out to you randomly, asking to hang out. Sometimes someone just like keeps on wanting to talk to you, or talking about like things that bother them. And that's gonna be a cries for help. It could be a friend or a family member joking about suicide. That could be a really big warning sign, that even if it's just a joke, a lot of jokes there's a hint of truth in there. So that's so I could say. How about y'all?
I would say that I think that some really good warning signs to look out for are a little bit more reflective of like your own behavior. It's important to look out for everybody else, to look out for the people that you love, your siblings, your friends, your community. I firmly believe in that, but I think that it's important to also look out for yourself. I think that it's important to watch for like sudden loss of interest in things that like you would usually enjoy. A lot of the times people, I'll just speak for me personally, right? So what I tend to do when I'm like hella struggling and when like my mental health is not right is that like I'll take on more than I can chew. I have a lot of like self-sabotaging tendencies. Like when I'm afraid of something, I'll mess it up for myself. Like it's just something that like I've always struggled with. And so when my mental health is starting to slip, I'll take like extra classes. Like there was one semester I think I took like 24 units, and like that was like one of my worst like mental health semesters. I'll pick up extra hours. Like I'll look for other jobs. Like I'll just stack like all this work on top of myself, and that's like my own self-destruction. And like it takes away the joy and like the things that I would usually enjoy. Like I started hating school, I started hating work, I started hating like sleep. I felt super guilty for sleeping, and then it got to the point where like I couldn't sleep. I was tired all the time, I was zoning out all the time. Like I wasn't present. And like I just like that it really snowballed into like me like losing a grip on like myself. And like I it got to the point where like I was just so desperate for like a break. Like I just wanted to sleep. Like I just wanted to turn my brain off for a little bit. Like I was taking like a ton of like sleeping pills, and like thinking back on it now, like very clearly like I was spiraling, like very clearly like it was going like I was going south fast. But because like I'm always so caught up in looking out for like other people, and like looking out for my job, looking out for the organizations that I was a part of, looking out for my sisters, like I forgot to look out for myself, and like I genuinely like almost lost myself. So I think that it's important to look for warning signs in other people, but also look for them in yourself. Like pay attention to yourself, pay attention to your behavior.
I love that. Thank you. And yes, that's really true, because we tend to focus so much on other people. You want to help other people, but we have to realize that we must help ourselves too. How can we help other people if we don't help ourselves? Yeah. Anything to say, Camille?
Well, at first, I really just want to, again, echo everything that Carla named, because I think it is always important to bring it back to ourselves and allow us that moment of caring for ourselves, because we live in a world where we just got to keep going, we got to keep pushing, and it's really for the validation of other people. So we need to bring it back to ourselves. So I really want to thank Carla for naming all that. And we can go, we can go down these lists of symptoms of giving away important possessions, sudden loss of interest in things that give you joy, continuously talk of like shame and guilt, acting anxious or agitated, increasing your substance use in a form of codependency. Like we can talk about all that, but I think what it really comes down to is you caring for yourself and your community. And I'm not talking about this like oversimplified form of care. I'm talking about you understand the people around you so much, to the point where if things do change, or if you do see a sign of someone's like depressed or in a really deep state of sadness, then you have the ability to see that for yourself and say, hey, this might be something else. Like, let's really check in. Let's name that, hey, I'm seeing this. Because it really comes down to your own personal actions on whether you're gonna support someone in times of need. All at the same time, I also want to name, at least from my experience, the people who have taken their lives, or the people who do have suicide ideation, are the ones you least expect, right? They're like, again, it's not this singular understanding, oh, someone's sad, they could be at risk, right? I've personally, when I did my first when I did my first presentation connecting mental health with leadership, I gave a picture of myself on stage, happy, enjoying my life, and I just posted that picture on Instagram. And 3 days later is when I engaged in self-harm, and when suicide ideation really came about for me, just to really show you that sometimes you aren't going to see the warning signs. You aren't going to be able to tell that someone is in need, that someone is in crisis. Yes, matching that with individuals who are struggling may not, for whatever reason, feel comfortable or safe asking for help, but it's also to be mindful. If you really care about those around you, then you're checking in with them. If they're typically hanging out with you and all of a sudden they like ghost you, why is that? Right? Like, let's not go towards judgment. Let's question so we can better understand.
I love that. I love the way you worded that. So
Yeah.
I do want to ask for the audience, with understanding and taking care of yourself and realize like I have these behaviors. What do you do to live another day? Like, when you're thinking about like suicide or self-harm, like how do you help yourself? Like, what do you do for yourself?
I think that if I'm speaking generally, I would have to say that you should be mindful of like what you're doing. Like, if you have it in you to acknowledge that you're going through something, and you're like, you become aware of it, then be mindful of like what it could do to you. Like, be mindful of like how that impacts like your behaviors and everything. And if we're talking for me personally, like what I do when I know that like I'm having like a bad mental health day is like I try to be just like extremely mindful of like what I do, because I'm so aware of like my own toxic tendencies. Like, I know that like when I start doing something a little bit too much, that I know what kind of mental health space that I'm in. But that just comes from knowing myself like really, really well, and knowing my behavior really, really well, and knowing what to look for. So I just really encourage people to take the time to just like be with themselves, to like really, really like reflect on how you are feeling. Like, it's easy to go about your day and just like mask it with like more work, more accomplishments, and like it feels good. Like, it makes it gets you like the validation of everybody around you. But how often like do you really listen to yourself, and how often are you really aware of exactly where your mind's at and exactly where your feelings are? Like, how often do you sit with yourself and you help yourself process those things? Like, how often do you be that person that sits there with somebody else and helps them process their things? Like, we all need time to just like exhale. Like, we can't just like inhale all the time.
I love that. And just to remember that like you're not going to have all the answers, and to remember to give yourself time whenever you need it to.
Mm-hmm.
And like for me, I feel like when I have when my mental health is really, really bad, I tend to like, just like you said, I put a lot of things on my plate. And I feel like that's my coping mechanism, is just to always stay busy, so I won't think about or feel everything else that's bothering me. And then I end up like having a breakdown. I end up like going, like not going insane, but like so caught up in everything that's going on, and I just lose it. And one thing that I do is I let myself feel. Like if I have so many things, I have work, I have this, I have this, and I cannot do it, I listen to my body. And I listen to myself and I'm all like, I cannot do it right now. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that you cannot do it. Just because you cannot do it right now doesn't mean that you're not going to do it later on. Like, just recognize that I cannot do it right now. I need a break. I need to sit down and cry all day if I need to. You know, I need to like pay attention to what my mind and body is telling me. And that's how I kind of help myself. How about you, Camille?
I love what both of you shared, listening to your body, bringing it back to you, spending time with yourself. Because, you know, we live in a society where if you're not hustling, then what are you doing, right? You're not of value to anyone if you're not doing work or helping someone out or helping the community, when in actuality, like, because our society is like that, the biggest thing you can do for yourself is take your time back, is sit with yourself, is reflect within yourself and really give your time, energy, and care to your own fulfillment. I would say for me, I want to say like pre-pandemic, I wasn't in a place where I personally could bring myself to go to therapy, but I luckily was in a place to share with individuals who cared about me so much that they walked with me to my counseling session. And from there, that's where I feel like I was able to really start to love myself again. And thus what I did, because I was always a busy person, had a very long list of things to do, different activities and meetings to go to, what I was able to do was recognize, okay, well, I need dancing in my schedule. Like, that's just a non-negotiable. And so having that type of stability and consistency in my schedule where this is just for me, this is where I get my emotional fulfillment, that really balanced myself out. And I want to say now in the pandemic, I think, you know, I'm always very mindful of, right, like finding the silver lining in things, because I really think that kind of narrative is can be like destructive rather than beneficial. But at least for me, kind of the new ways I found myself able to bring myself back to a joyous place is not being afraid of my feelings and my thoughts, and to really engage back with those feelings and thoughts and gaining understanding of myself, right? Like, just echoing what Carla said about like that self-awareness. So if I am in a place where I need to take a step back from work, now I take it unapologetically. Where before it would be like, oh, now I'm not being that good person, I'm not being that right, like, employee, like, what are they gonna think about me? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because what matters at the end of the day is me and my peace. And that's really important. So I've done a lot of shadow work and a lot of reflection of understanding how my past traumas continue to carry weight on me today. And that really helps. Meditating has also been able to increase my mindfulness and my ability to just be present in this moment. And I think at the end of the day, what really helps me is just reminding myself that if I love myself, then I'm never alone, right? Like, we continue to seek this external validation, and it's true. We all deserve to feel loved, safe, and secure in someone else's presence. Everyone deserves that. Like, we're human beings. Like, connection is necessary. And all at the same time, if you're not giving yourself that same care and energy, then like, what is the point, right? Like, you are beautiful, you are powerful than any of those negative thoughts. So let's give time back to yourself, you know?
I love that. And just for anyone who needs this right now, is that it's time, give yourself time. Give yourself time to feel, give yourself time to figure everything out. Give yourself time that you need, unapologetically, that, like we tend to live life thinking that we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to finish this, we need to figure it out right now. You don't have to figure it out right now. You can wait. You can learn. You can be lost for a little bit, but that doesn't mean you can't be found again. Mm-hmm. And that's something that like we need to, like, a lot of us need to learn, and to realize that I know a lot of people can't handle their demons alone. So remember that people need people. There's nothing wrong with going to someone. There's nothing wrong with going to a therapist. There's nothing wrong to going to someone that will be there for you. Because yes, we should always be okay within ourselves, but to remember that if you really, really need someone, please do it. Because we have this perception in society that like we must be independent. I don't need no one. I don't trust no one. I don't like F everyone, like I'm gonna be by myself. But you have to realize in the darkest moments, sometimes we do need people. It doesn't mean you're gonna be dependent on them. It doesn't mean that you're gonna need them all the time. You just need someone. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. And it's also knowing who you need.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think what kind of just affirmed, because of the way I was raised, I didn't really develop that sense of it's okay to ask for help, right? And because of that, I keep it all in, I keep it to myself. And there have been times where I open up to the wrong people, and that's gonna happen. Not everyone is perfect, and not everyone is really for you, and that's okay. Not everyone is gonna understand, and that's okay. And so that's why it's important to find your critical community of when you are in that dark place. Okay, who is someone I know I can call and is not going to judge me, is just going to hear me. And like you said, oftentimes that helps.
Yes. Thank you for all that. And then next we're going to talk about like, since we talked about what we could do, what could we do for other people? Like if we see that a family or friend is struggling, what can we do? Because for me, I had a loved one who talked openly about it. And I just didn't know what to do. I was a kid. This person is really important to me. I didn't understand. I didn't know what to do. And this is why I think suicide awareness is so important to me, is because like I didn't get a chance to do that when I was younger, but now I do. Now I can help the people who need it. Now I can help my loved one who went through it. Now I can spread awareness of that. So what do y'all think? What do you think we could do for other people who are struggling or thinking or thinking of self-harm or anything?
What I think that we could do for other people who have either opened up to you about the fact that this is how they feel, or that you suspect that this is how they feel, is to just be present. That's it. That's really all you have to do, is be present. Like nobody expects you to have an answer. Like nobody expects you to be like a professional and to know what to do. There's no protocol. Everybody is different. But as long as you make yourself available to that person and you let yourself be an outlet to however it is that they feel like they need, like maybe they just need to feel like somebody cares about them. Maybe they just need to feel like somebody's willing to hear them out. Maybe they just need to feel like somebody will miss them if they were gone. That's all that they really need. You don't have to sit there and like be their therapist and like pry for like all of the things that they might not even really want to talk about, but just making yourself available and present is very often more than enough.
Yeah, I think that, you said it like beautifully, that if there's one thing, it's just being present. That can do so much for someone. And again, like, you don't even have to say anything. You can just sit there with them in silence, and that's enough too. More than enough too.
I wanna touch on a couple of things with this question. One, I also want to say that I think in terms of helping someone who is in high crisis, it's a balance between knowing your capacity of how much you can support them and knowing when they are in need of someone else or they are in need of a professional, and being able to recognize that. Because I also want to name that it is not up to everyone to save another person's life, right? And I think that's what's like the growing narrative of people are like, like ask your friends before you unload on them, ask if they're okay before you vent, which is like, yes, let's be mindful, because we don't want to re-trigger people, we don't want to add to anyone else's harm. And we have to meet that with recognizing if someone is really in need and is really contemplating these actions, because at that point, yes, you may be protecting your own self, but to them, you're just another person pushing them away. And so I really want to name that. I also want to name that, yes, if someone is in pain and in need, you need to be able to recognize what they need in that moment. And like Carla said, she listed all of the ways that you can support someone. I mean, as little as just being present, just being there, offering a hand. And if someone is planning a suicide attempt, then in those moments, I refer back to QPR, which is a suicide prevention training tool, which is question, persuade, and refer. And the reason why I say that is because if someone is already planning on the attempt, then they are at the point where they need intervention. They need critical intervention. And so when you are asking those questions, at that point, if you really think that that's to the extent that they're at, then you need to be direct with them. Are you planning to hurt yourself? Are you planning to hurt others? Have you already decided when you're going to do this? Because it goes back to, right, like suicide is taboo, so you don't want to ask those questions. And if someone is in need, you need to be able to identify that need in order to persuade them to get help. But I also want to name that professional help is not always the best idea. I mean, the lack of cultural sensitivity can be one point, but that's a whole other topic. But again, if someone is in high crisis, you need to be able to identify that need and be able to refer them to resources that are best going to fit them and their situation.
I think that's a really good thing that you're saying, is that, like, a lot of people just don't know. Just don't know how to help. Just don't know how to do it. But number one thing is to figure out what need they want, what they have, like what they actually really need. So thank you for sharing that. Lastly, I want to ask both of you, what is the biggest takeaway you want the audience to learn from you, or to think about, or what meaningful message would you like to say to the audience, that even if, depending if they're contemplating suicide, depending if they're either if they're wanting to learn about suicide awareness, or even if they're even thinking about it, what's something you would want to say to them?
What's something that I would want to say to people who are thinking about becoming more educated on this topic? Mm-hmm. Okay. I would honestly just say go for it. Like you can't go wrong on keeping yourself educated. Like the more that we know about mental health, the more that we can destigmatize it, the more that we can make it a common thing to talk about, the better. Like the easier that it'll be for people to not feel like, oh my God, like I'm a 1 in a billion, like I'm such an anomaly, like what's wrong with me, like why am I like this, and more of like, okay, Like, this is a thing that happens sometimes. Like, the resources exists, help exists, communities exist, support system exists. I feel like I didn't really talk about mental health or suicide or self-harm until I got to college, until I got to college in fall of 2013, which is the same semester that I rushed. And during my rush, like I would always be like on my phone, or I would always be like worried, and I wouldn't really be that social. And like sisters picked up on it, and like it just so happened that like at the time that I was rushing, like my sister had to be like, she had to go to like a facility like twice, and it was really hard for me to like try to pursue college, try to pursue like my own life, try to start discovering like who I am. And I just like I have to be there for my sister. And it wasn't until I started becoming affiliated with the sorority that like more people were willing to have that conversation with me. Like my big was service chair at the time, my pledge mom, like she always talked about like how it impacted her life. Like just more people around me were talking about it. And honestly, like if it weren't for those conversations, if it weren't for those people sharing with me that like it wasn't this like anomaly, that I wasn't I wasn't doing anything wrong, I just didn't know what I was doing. And for them to teach me the things that they taught me, and for me to be able to apply it to my family, like it just means so much to me. And so the more educated that I can make other people, the more that I can have these conversations. Like if I feel like I do for somebody, like at least one person, what like those sisters did for me, like I'm good.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. How about you, Camille?
Just clarifying, is it like what we're saying to those who want to get more educated, and then like another one, it'll be a message to someone hurting, or is this that part?
It could be both. It's like, because people in the audience are like in variety. There's some people in the audience that like need this message. Some people in the audience just want to be aware. It depends what message you want to any, because the audience is kind of like big. It's not only one.
Okay. All right. So for those who are interested on becoming more educated about this topic, yes, like learn the warning signs, learn the statistics, learn the intervention strategies, and apply those teachings to your own healing, as well as your healing strategies that you give when you connect to another person. And I would say the next step beyond that is to really deep contexts that make these statistics true, right? Like look into why there is such a high rate of trans lives attempting suicide. Look into why non-binary youth are at a higher percentage of contemplating suicide than others. Look at how people experiencing homelessness, or people with a codependency to substances, like how those areas of life are more inclined to have this issue put on them. And I say that because, again, like this isn't just a simple situation to be in. Like it requires an understanding of the depth that really gets people into there. And then I do want to say a message to those who may be hurting, and this is my message to you. You are beautiful and strong beyond any reasonable doubt. I want to validate every single feeling that you are carrying right now, because I know it's layered, and I know you're not showing all of that pain to really anyone. And I know how tiring it is to be strong. And there are so many people rooting for you that you may not have met yet. There are so many different resources that really want to give you the care and support that you are looking for. And if you need help finding that right now, and I know when you've asked for help, you've run into more problems than solutions, but please ask for help one more time to someone you really trust and someone who really carries that capacity to help you and refer you to resources that are going to help you through this, because you are not alone and you are oh so loved. And if you need anyone, there are 3 beautiful people in this podcast to hit up.
Thank you so much. And that's beautiful. And my message is that if you really needed something to, like, if you really need something, if you needed that one sign that you should live another day, let this be one of them. That remember that you are not alone, that you are deserving to be in this world, and you are very loved by the people around you and the people that you will meet in the future. And I'm going to end asking the audience is, what is the one reason why you continue to live another day? And I want you to think about that reason. Let that empower you. Let that motivate you. And let that one reason be the reason why you live continuous days, because you deserve to be here. So that is the end of my podcast. Thank you for listening to The Courage in You.